Sports Desk at the Columbus Dispatch presents the BuckeyeXtra Basketball Podcast. With your host, Ohio State basketball beat writer Adam Jardy.
Brady Batiste says, "Give me the rock." Here it goes. Up and away. Slam jam bam. And now he does a little dance.
Now, the BuckeyeXtra Basketball Podcast.
Hello, everyone. This is Adam Jardy from the Columbus Dispatch. Today is Monday, January 5th, 2026. It's my official duty to welcome you into episode 520 of the BuckeyeXtra Men's Basketball Podcast. Welcome to Jubilation City. Do we need to change the intro? Do I need to come up with something different to say, depending on whether Ohio State wins or loses? Let me know if you think so, because it feels a little off. Like if you notice, whenever I post the post-game interviews to Twitter, I always post video ! But when it's a particularly difficult loss or an ugly loss or whatever, honestly, pretty much anytime it's a loss, I'll just post I'll just say video. Here's the post-game video or whatever. So maybe we need to change Welcome to Jubilation City when we're sitting here on a night like tonight where Ohio State followed the script that it has followed for much of the season. The Buckeyes came out against a high major opponent, fell behind, dug a sizable hole this time in the first half once again, found a way to make it interesting, rallied, retook the lead, and then ultimately came up one possession short. Final tonight from the Jerome Schottenstein Center. You might have noticed it doesn't say Value City Arena on the court anymore. Final tonight, number 10, Nebraska 72, Ohio State 69. The Cornhuskers' fever dream of a season continues. Nebraska enjoying its best start in program history. The Cornhuskers are undefeated at 15-0. They are 4-0 in the Big Ten. This is only the second true road game in the season for the Cornhuskers, and they now have 2 3-point victories. They won at Illinois by 3, and they won this game at Ohio State by 3. Ohio State fell behind by 14 points, trailed by 14 with 8:31 to go in the first half. Did pull out a lead in the second half, was up 3 with 8:38 to go, and couldn't maintain it. Couldn't make it stand up. There were so many momentum plays in this game. I felt like there were so many moments where my play-by-play, I just kept starring this play and then starring the next play or starring this sequence, thinking like maybe this is going to be like the one that will flip the game, or this will be the moment where it changed. And it's kind of a weird vibe right now to try to wrap my head around like what ultimately led to this game turning out the way that it did. And when we talked to, we got Jake Diebler and we got John Mobley Jr. Simultaneously. Diebler took the press conference or started the press conference, and then Mobley came in, sat next to him, and we asked a couple of questions to him. Then he was done, and then we continued with Diebler. So the whole thing lasted like half an hour. And I felt like a lot of it just kind of kept circling back to some of the same key talking points over and over again, which basically was just, how does this keep happening? And is there reason to believe it will change? Because we have seen Ohio State repeatedly show an ability to battle back. And I do think before we even get into like the specifics of this game and some of the other thoughts that I have, like it is blatantly evident when you watch this team that it has some real like stuff to it, grit, whatever you want to call it, because you don't have to think back too far to how many times like a 14-point loss or a 14-point deficit became a 25-point loss, or how many non-competitive games, even like look at last season, how many non-competitive games did Ohio State play last year? Like go back to some of that, the early going, and this is not me trying to paint some sort of like rosy picture that's not there. I think I'm just trying to speak to like the weirdness of trying to make sense of where this team is, where it's not, and what we know about it, because Ohio State has a better record than it did at this point last year. The Buckeyes were 9-5 at this point last season and 1-2 in the Big Ten. This year's team it wasn't that long ago this team couldn't win on the road. Ohio State went like 19 straight games with a road loss. And yet somehow the Buckeyes are 2-0 on the road in the Big Ten this year and 0-2 at home. And some of that has to do with they played Northwestern and Rutgers on the road, and they played top 15 Illinois and top 10 Nebraska at home. And so that's part of it. But back to my point a second ago, just look at like the early going last season. The loss to Texas A&M, Ohio State was never in that game. Lost by 14. They went to Maryland and got blown out 83-59, the first Big Ten game of the Jake Diebler era, and they were non-competitive and a non-threat in that game. And then 10 days later in Atlanta, they get boat raced by Auburn, 91-53. And then things leveled out from there, and things got more competitive. But like, there at no point this season has been this game is over and they've got no shot. This team is in it, but it can't do it, at least against the high major teams or the teams that it really at some point does need to start beating in order to have a legitimate NCAA tournament resume. There are still a million opportunities ahead for this team, and that is very much a fact. Like, there are 16 Big Ten games left, plus a neutral court game against Virginia, plus whatever this team ends up doing in the Big Ten tournament. At this moment, KenPom projects Ohio State to go 9-7 in the Big Ten the rest of the way, which would put Ohio State at 11-9 in the league. Ohio State's in the tournament at that point. Like, the Big Ten's going to get a bunch of teams in, and if you're above 500 in the league, Ohio State would be in. Like, but what we are seeing is this repeated pattern of trailing for significant stretches against high major teams, and then needing to do everything to try to pull out a comeback. And then sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And tonight, it didn't. At Rutgers on Friday, it did. Against North Carolina in Atlanta, it didn't. At Northwestern, it did. They got to figure a couple things out to try to make some of these things flip. And we'll talk more about that in a minute here. Running down this box score, it's kind of remarkable how similar a lot of things look. Ohio State finished the game 26 of 57 from the floor. Nebraska was 25 of 57 from the floor. Ohio State was 9 of 26 from 3. Nebraska was 8 of 29 from 3. The difference in the game ultimately came from the free throw line. And Ohio State had some uncharacteristic misses. The Buckeyes only took 13 free throws and finished 8 of 13. So certainly circle that in a 3-point loss. You go 61.5% from the line. And I think a guy who kind of typifies like what is this team? What are they doing? What's the ceiling? Like, all the whatever is Christoph Tilley, who came into this game shooting 82.3% from the free throw line and went 1 of 4. And 2 of those misses was one of the sequences that I started. And we'll get to that in a minute. And ends up being Christoph Tilley, who, after missing 11 straight three-pointers, he had not hit one since the Mount St. Mary's game on November 25th, hits a three-pointer in this game. And then it's ultimately the ball in his hands with 4 seconds left for a three-pointer that is, he missed it by a wide margin. And we'll talk about that play in a second. But he finishes with 8 and 3 in 33 minutes, misses 3 free throws, misses the potential game-tying three-pointer in the final seconds. Whereas down the stretch, Nebraska makes its free throws. The Cornhuskers, in doing enough to keep Ohio State at arm's length, got a three-point play with 32.7 seconds left, and then got 2 really important free throws with 9.1 seconds left to make it a 3-point game, setting up the final possession. But Nebraska they did just enough. And the 2 main things that got talked about post-game were that Ohio State dug itself too big of a hole in the first half, and it did not win enough 50-50 balls in the second half. Ohio State was led in this game by John Mobley Jr., who had 22 points on 17 shots, but I thought he was 5 of 13 from 3. He got some pretty good looks, and I actually felt like this was one of his better games. There was 1 3 that he took where when we talked to Jake Diebler during the weekend, he said, like, the things that he'll talk to Mobley about when he takes a bad shot is like, John, you're a better player than that shot. Take a better shot. Felt like he had 1 of those in this game, but did finish 5 of 13, and I thought was dangerous looking. Like, I felt like he went through a little bit of a lull shooting wise a couple weeks ago. I feel like he's out of that, and I feel like that's a strong part of Ohio State's offense. Because they got 22 from him, they got 16 from Bruce Thornton. 14 of those came after halftime. Bruce had 16 points, 7 assists, 5 rebounds, 1 turnover, playing 37 minutes, 29 seconds. Definitely looked a little bit banged up by the end. And they, at one point, Jake Diebler said he used the timeout just because he wanted to give him a breather. Like, he had a really difficult physical finish, fell to the floor hard, and so Diebler used the timeout there during the second half. I thought that was a good timeout in that moment. And then Devin Royal had 14 and 6. He was 5 of 8 from the floor, missed both of his 3-point attempts. He also he was 4 of 6 from the free throw line. He's emerged as really solid free throw shooter. He came in shooting 80%, and then goes 4 of 6. Not to pin this on Devin Royal missing 2 free throws, but like those are like little things that can start to add up. Mari Bynum had 9 and 9, and Christoph Tilley had 8. And then I would run down the production for the rest of the team, but there was none. Ohio State got 0 points off its bench for the second time this season. Gabe Cupps did not take a shot in 11 minutes and 40 seconds. Brandon Knoll missed 2 layups in the first half, only played 8 minutes and 4 seconds, and suffered a foot injury apparently in the first half. Tried to play through it in the second half. I had to come out, and I did not see by the end, but was watching apparently in a walking boot. So we don't have a more firm update on him, but that would not necessarily bode well for a trip to the West Coast and another game here on Thursday night. But he was scoreless in 8 minutes and 4 seconds. And Colin White was in for 1:35 and did not record a statistic. So he goes down with the 2 trillion in this game. Nebraska led by Braden Frager, who had 15 points off the bench. All 8 Nebraska players to see action in this game had at least 3 points by halftime. That's not an inconsequential statistic. Ohio State outscored 22-0 in bench points. The Buckeyes did have a 17-8 advantage in points off of turnovers, and against one of the nation's best 2-point field goal defenses, we're outscoring the paint 32-30. I thought Ohio State missed a couple shots in the first half that it normally would make because I feel like Nebraska's length and height bothered the Buckeyes at times, but they were generally able to get some decent looks. Didn't always make them. And again, shot 45.6% from the game, came up 3 points short. So we're going to dive into this more here in a second. Before we do, I want to remind you can subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you enjoy your favorite podcasts. While you're subscribing or downloading, please leave a review. Please click 5 stars, and please consider telling a friend. Thanks everyone who's taken the time to do all those things. I got an email from Kevin S., who lives in D.C. and said his family, or he grew up in Bexley, and said that his wife was born and raised in Anchorage, Alaska, and her parents still live there. So I mentioned on the last podcast that we had a listener a listener last year in every state minus Alaska. And I said, we got to find somebody in Alaska. So he said, not quite gaining a listener in Alaska, but at least you have one from Alaska. So Kevin, that email made my day. I thought that was really cool. So thank you for reaching out. Thank you for sharing that. It was great to hear from you. And it was great that I ran into Gary L., longtime listener, longtime reader, running him at the shot from time to time, and had a good conversation with him before the game. So always appreciate those interactions. If I have a couple of minutes and you see me before a game, please don't hesitate to say hi. Please don't hesitate to come over and chit chat a little bit. That especially goes for anybody who will be at the Oregon and Washington games. Heading out that way, I will fly out on Wednesday and we'll be at both of those games. So we'll be doing all kinds of stuff before the game and trying to bring all the hashtag content that I can to everybody. But if you see me, say hi. I'd love to meet you and talk some Buckeyes and see what we see out there in the Pacific Northwest. I've never been to Eugene. I've never been to Seattle. So excited to check out these gyms and excited to get to see what transpires here for Ohio State, because these suddenly are both pivotal games for Ohio State because of a loss like this and because of a loss like North Carolina and a loss like Pitt and all of those things. So let's get into this game now a little bit more than I've already done. So I got a couple numbers that are in my post-game takeaways, and we did start another thing I should mention too. I always say on here how I've written the takeaways, and those will be up in the morning. I've started doing some quick takes. So I got quick takes and then takeaways and then the podcast. And the quick takes are just like some top of the head quick takeaways almost. Not super data driven and not super like interview informed, but just here's a couple of like right off the final whistle thoughts. And so that's already posted to dispatch.com. The takeaways will be up in the morning. So by the time you hear this, they'll be up there. But here's the thing I started thinking about. Because Ohio State has now played 8 games against high major teams. It's 4-4. And in those 8 games, it is even in points. It has scored the same number of points that it is allowed. And when I started looking at the box scores from these games, it something started to jog in the back of my brain just a little bit, where I thought, man, it seems like they're down a lot in these games. And so there have only been 2 of the 8 non-conference, or 2 of the 8 high major games the Buckeyes have played this year where they have led for more than 8 minutes. And those 2 were Northwestern and Rutgers. In those 2 games, Ohio State led for 18 minutes and 14 seconds and 20 minutes and 25 seconds. In the other 6, Ohio State has led for fewer than 8 minutes. And in only 2 of those 6 have the Buckeyes led for more than 6.5 minutes. So they are exerting an extraordinary amount of effort to get back into games. That is becoming a hallmark of this team, for better or for worse. They fall behind, but they fight their way back. It's better than falling behind and rolling over. We haven't seen that happen from this team, but they do keep falling behind. Now, here's the other thing that really jumped out to me. So in all 8 of those games, it's not just that they've been behind for the majority of the game. They've been behind by double digits. In its 8 games against high major competition this year, Ohio State has trailed by double digits in 7 of them. And the one that did not trail by double digits, it was down 9 at Northwestern. And then in each one of those 8 games, the opponent's largest lead of the game has been more than Ohio State's largest lead of the game. And that all adds up to tell me that there is a thin margin that Ohio State is working with at this point of the season. The Buckeyes do not have much room for error, which is a little bit wild when you look at it. Like, this is remaining one of the more prolific offenses that we've seen. Certainly, I mean, tonight only 69 points. It's not what we are accustomed to watching this season from the Buckeyes. But we talked so much, I felt like, in the summer and the fall about, how do you avoid so many 1-point games or 1-possession games? And it was, or, how do you avoid so many close losses? And it was, well, don't be down 4 going into the under 4 timeout. Maybe you're down 1, or maybe you're up 2, but it's like that, those little like sequences throughout the game where you're putting yourself 2 or 3 points better so that at the end it's not so razor thin. And that was something that last year's team really struggled with. And the belief was that there was enough depth on this team, and in addition to senior year Bruce Thornton and Devin Royal creating mismatch opportunities on the wing, and I am impressed with how Devin has played recently. That should make that abundantly clear. And John Mobley Jr. going from freshman to sophomore, that like your big 3 were going to be able to carry an even more significant load, but that there were more options down the list that would be able to chip in a few points here and a few points there. And what we're seeing from Ohio State right now is that there is not. I felt like for the most part, this was a pretty good glimpse of like Thornton, Mobley, and Royal all having moments where they were just impactful. I mean, I really like getting the ball to Devin Royal late in a game and saying, get a bucket. You can see Bruce Thornton physically take over games in the final couple minutes where they need to get a bucket. Like, it didn't matter that Nebraska had a bunch of guys that were way bigger than him. Like, he had a drive where he got in the paint, he spun, pivoted, pump faked, double clutched, laid it in, banked it off the glass. And that was when Diebler called the timeout to get him a little bit of a breather there. But like, I feel like they're getting what they're supposed to get from those 3. They're at least they're starting to kind of on a consistent basis. Devin looks fully recovered from the hip. Mobley's 3 is improving. I mean, he was at 40.5% coming into this game. So he is now sitting at 40.2%, which is 290th nationally. Bruce Thornton's at 44.1%. That's 115th nationally. So they're getting some stuff somewhat consistently, like from those 3. And then, I mean, Tilley and Bynum are kind of producing here and they're producing. Those guys aren't going to go scoreless on a given night. They're not going to not hit the glass on a given night. But what we're not seeing are anybody else on the bench stepping into any sort of appreciable role where it's taking pressure off of those big three. And when you start looking at why is this team, why do they play better in the second half, and why are they putting together like runs late or rallying when they're down? Why they're not playing with the urgency for the whole game that they need to or that they play with when they fall behind? I mean, I think some of it is that when they've gone from their primary contributors, they're not getting anything, and that creates further stress down the way that puts you in a hole that you're going to need to exert a lot of energy to dig out of. Diebler said that like his regret in this game was not that he didn't take a timeout at the end before the Christoph Tilley 3-pointer, but that he had one at all, because he said like he felt like fatigue became an issue at a time or two, and that you could see it in some of the guys. And he talked about like that's why he used the one after the Bruce Thornton bucket, because like Bruce was taking a beating. And he told me after the Rutgers game, I was the only Ohio State reporter there, and he told me in the hallway that like he had got his calf stepped on like late in that game. He had a tough bucket from the right block, and he had to come out of the game for a minute. He came in and he finished it. I did see him getting some treatment like during the game, while during a timeout. Like it's fair to say he ain't 100%. And I don't know anybody that is, but like he's still leading the team in minutes by a wide margin. I mean, I guess Mobley did, miss some time with the injury. But coming into this game, Bruce had played 467 minutes, and the next most prolific player was John Mobley at 374 minutes. And that was with missing one half of basketball. I hadn't really quite noticed that until now. But Bruce came in at 36 minutes a game, and he played 37 minutes and 29 seconds in this game. And Devin Royals at 30.5 minutes a game. They're using him a lot, and they need to, because he's having an incredible season. But to get back to the lack of bench anything, you start looking down the roster here, and I actually I had someone message me this, and they said they never thought that necessarily that they would miss Quez Glover off the bench. I think Ohio State would take Quez Glover's offensive contributions, such as they were last year. I mean, this is the second game where Ohio State's bench produced no points. There's one other game where it produced 2 points. They're not getting anything from just about anybody. And it will be interesting. Like, we'll see what Brandon Knoll can do and how, what is going on with his foot and what impact that has going forward. But when they moved Brandon Knoll out of the starting lineup and brought Amari Bynum into the starting lineup, it obviously, like, Amari Bynum deserves to be a starter, and he's playing like a starter. He's really starting to come into his own a little bit, but that did remove a spark from the bench, from that part of the rotation. That at Rutgers, Brandon Knoll had 14 points in the first half and really kept them going. We talked about that. I wrote about that. That was significant for Ohio State. But he hasn't consistently produced since moving to the bench. And having said that, he's still the most consistent bench contributor, because when you start looking down the roster, nobody else is. When I was going through these numbers here, so Tayson Chapman did not appear in this game, and he played 348 against Rutgers. He had a steal, but he had no other stats. In the last 6 games, Gabe Cupps has 2 points, and he's only taken 3 shots. Ivan Yagovin has hardly played. He's been an unused sub in 4 games. And just, he was going to sub in this game. Christoph Tilley was at the line, and so he's going to come in for Tilley, like, to kind of lead into immediate timeout. But then Tilley missed both free throws, so he stayed on the floor, and then Yagovin didn't get in. Matthew Griachich has not played against a high major team yet. He's appeared in 6 games this season. Most recently, he played a minute 5 against Grambling State and didn't record a statistic. Colin White has played in all 14 games, which, so Bruce, Mobley, Tilley, Bynum, Knoll, Cupps, and Colin White. Those are the 7 guys who have played in every game so far this season. This was the 5th game that Colin White did not attempt a shot, and the 6th time this season that he did not get a rebound. And you're not asking any of these guys to come in and do 14 points in the first half like Brandon Knoll against Rutgers, but someone has to do something. And Diebler's message, he said, he's been repeating this a lot, that he said he's told the bench guys, I want you to be aggressive. We can't go out there and play safe. We need production. We need rebounds. We need points. He said, I have confidence someone's going to emerge. We'll have a couple of guys step, and that will unlock something for us. And then he was specifically asked about Griachich, Chapman, and Yagovin. And he said, I've got to look at who we're giving the opportunity to, certainly. When guys are in, they've got to be aggressive. I've told guys, you're going in a game and you're passing up open shots. You're hesitating. That's not helping us win. He said, I want guys to be aggressive. You've got to show that in practice. And when you're out there in the game, you've got to show that as well. It's becoming more and more pronounced of an issue. And as these games continue to go down to the wire, and as the level of competition remains high, someone's got to do something. And we'll see, like I said, what Brandon Knoll's status ultimately looks like for the Oregon game on Thursday. And if he's not available, what ripple effect does that have? Who takes some of those minutes? I know he only played 8 in this game because of the injury, but like, if Brandon Knoll can't play, does that mean they slide Devin Royal more to the 4 in his absence? And then does that create a few more minutes where Colin White has to produce, or where we see Matthew Griachich against a high major opponent? I can't imagine that we're going to see much. I mean, I still have a hard time trying to close my eyes and picture that they're going to be able to play Yagovin and Tilly together. But maybe that's something. How many more minutes can Amari Bynum take as a freshman? This was his 4th start. He came in averaging 24 minutes a game, and he played 34 minutes and 47 seconds. I thought this team would have more depth at this point of the season, and that has just not panned out to this point. And that will remain an issue, I think, and could be the thing that holds this team back, because it just remains very clear that they are close. They are really close. But at some point, like, close just ain't good enough. And I hear from plenty of fans who feel that way. They're just, when is this going to change? When is this team going to win this game? Like, when's this team going to get a signature win? I was talking with Robin, Robin, I'm blanking her last name, Washut, who covers Nebraska for the On3 website there. And I've known Robin for a good while here. And we were talking before the game. He made the trip. He was covering the game in person. And he said, like, what we're talking about the respective seasons these teams have had. And he said, like, what's Ohio State's signature win right now? And I was like, I don't know, Notre Dame, like at Northwestern. Like, honestly, I don't know. And so until this team gets a signature win, this is kind of where things are. And that wouldn't even be as big of a deal, I don't think, if they hadn't lost to Pitt. We're going to harp on that Pitt loss all season. I haven't checked on Pitt in a minute. Let's see, where is Pitt right now? All right, the Pitt Panthers are 7-8 right now, after the win against Ohio State was sandwiched by a 2-game losing streak and a 3-game losing streak that included a home loss to Hofstra. And then Panthers went and beat Binghamton at home, and then beat the snot out of Penn State on a neutral, 80-46 back on December 21st. But since then have taken a 7-point loss to Miami and a 5-point loss to Clemson to drop to 7-8 overall, 0-2 in the ACC, 94th at Ken Palm. For whatever it's worth, and the answer is probably very little, Ohio State is projected as a favorite in 9 of its remaining 16 Big Ten games, according to Ken Palm, which would put Ohio State at 11-9 in the league if it were to hold serve there, which would make for an interesting resume, because just running down it right now, those 9 wins are projected against Oregon, which is a projected 2-point game, and then the Washington game is a projected 1-point loss. But you've got Oregon, 2-point win, UCLA at home, 3-point win, Minnesota home, 10-point win, Penn State home, 13-point win. These are all projections again. USC home, projected 5-point win. Wisconsin home, projected 5-point win, and then at Penn State, 6-point win, and then home against Indiana, 1-point win on the last day, or last game of the season. All those teams that I just named, maybe Indiana's a tournament team. I don't know, maybe USC. That would still put Ohio State in a weird spot, I feel like, at 11-9, and like, well, what's the signature win? A lot of basketball to be played. We'll see how that shakes out, but I got to win some of these games. It's just, and in the act of full transparency here, like I said this to a couple of people that I ran into before the game, like the whole day leading into Ohio State's game against Pitt, I just felt like Ohio State was going to lose that game. I just felt it. It just seemed like that's how that was going to go. And then having said that, I felt like all day leading into this game, even yesterday, I just felt like Ohio State's going to win this game. Like it just seemed like that's how it was going to go. And then it didn't. I want to go over a couple of moments that I starred here in this game. So these are some of the sequences, as I drop my pen, some of the sequences that jumped out to me that I felt like all ultimately, none of these were the reason that Ohio State lost, but these are moments where you say, okay, yep, that. So the Buckeyes couldn't get it going early, and Nebraska scored on its first 4 possessions. The Buckeyes were down 10-1. And they had, what was it, 2 3-pointers. It was 10-1, and then it was 13-5. And then Ohio State's defense kicked in a little bit, and the Buckeyes got a turnover. Another turnover. Mari Bynum came up with a steal. Mobley hit a 3. So Ohio State's within 5. They battled for rebound and got them, forced another empty possession. So they had 5 straight stops, Ohio State did, but still only was within 13-8. And then Nebraska got an offensive rebound and scored, pushed it back to 7. But Ohio State started a little bit of a run here. John Mobley, the only free throw he attempted in the game, he faked a 3, drew the contact, scored, hit the free throw, pulled Ohio State within 4. And then Gabe Cupps came up with a steal, and Devin Royal fed Amari Bynum for a slam dunk. So it's 15-13, and the crowd started to get into it at this point. And that continued as the shot clock was winding down, and Nebraska gets the ball to Braden Frager, who is a freshman, 6'7", 215-pound freshman, redshirt freshman, and he just cut right through the Ohio State defense and scored. The fans were standing, the fans were yelling. This is the first play that I started because it felt like, okay, Ohio State's within 2. They had scored on a couple consecutive possessions. Get a stop, get a score, game's tied, who knows what happens. Next play was the bad shot that John Mobley took. And this is the one he talked about it after the game. It's just like a leaning, throw the ball at the rim jumper that had no real chance of going in. And then at the other end, it led to kind of a run out. And number 9, whose name I'm not even going to try to pronounce, had a dunk. Now Ohio State's down 6. Brandon Knoll, who had a really rough stretch here, missed a point-blank layup. And Nebraska comes down and scores. It's an 8-point deficit. Brandon Knoll gets the ball at the top of the circle. He passes up a 3-pointer and drives right into Sam Hoiberg, all 6 foot, 180 pounds of him. Hoiberg takes the charge. We go into the timeout. Ohio State's down 8. Right out of the timeout, Nebraska hits a 3. This one was from Jared Garcia. Now it's an 11-point deficit. Gabe Cupps turns it over. Ohio State forces a miss, but then Brandon Knoll gets the ball in the right block and misses another point-blank layup. And then at the other end, this is where the deficit gets to the highest point of the game. Brandon Knoll fouls Cale Jacobson on a 3, and it becomes a 3-point play. So he hits the free throw. Ohio State's down 27-13, and this is a 12-0 run for the Cornhuskers. And just an ugly stretch of basketball where from that point, Ohio State's chasing the game. And next sequence that I started, just a couple possessions later, where Ohio State got its offense going. The Buckeyes scored on 4 straight possessions and cut it to 29-23 on a Christoph Tilley 3-pointer. Again, he had missed his last 11. He wasn't really shooting anymore at this point, but he hit it. You could see like the euphoria on his face. You felt like there's the weight off the shoulders. Ohio State's within 6, and then Frager drives again and scores. Just like easy drive. It's back to 8, and then it goes up to 10. So here's the next one that really jumped out to me. Ohio State's within 33-28 after an Amari Bynum 3-pointer, and Nebraska's Bryce Sanford misses a 3-pointer, and the Buckeyes get it to Christoph Tilley, who fakes the 3, drives, draws the foul. 4:26 to go in the half. Ohio State's down 5. Tilley's like an 80, came in shooting, what did I say? 83% from the line. Nope, that's Mobley. Tilley shooting 82.3% from the line. Really has been one of the bedrocks of this team, that like he's good at drawing contact, he's good at getting to the line, and he's a very prolific, accurate free throw shooter. So he goes to the line here, having just hit his first 3 in a month and a half, and misses both. And then Nebraska comes out and has just a beautiful offensive possession. Lots of movement, lots of cutting, lots of curling. And the ball ends up with Sam Hoiberg in the left corner, and he buries a three-pointer. And just like that, instead of being down 3, Ohio State's down 8. And again, you're just chasing, and you're chasing. John Mobley hits a 3 to pull Ohio State back within 5 after Ohio State then gets 1, 2, forces 3 straight defense, or gets 3 straight stops, pulls within 5 on a Mobley three-pointer, and then Sam Hoiberg has just an easy drive, dishes it right off to number 9. He scores. It's a 7-point deficit. So Ohio State goes into the half down 38-31, and then opens the half by giving up a wide-open three-pointer to Price Sanford. It's a 10-point deficit again, just like that. Then Ohio State fights back. It's a 3 from Thornton. Devin Royal hits a free throw. Buckeyes keep kind of fighting their way back. Here's another point where you could feel the crowd starting to feel it. Ohio State, John Mobley starting to feel it a little bit. He hits a jumper with 15-18 to go to pull Ohio State within 4. And then Devin Royal plays some really solid defense and forces Jamarcus Lawrence into a turnover over and back. Crowd is roaring. There's 15:01 to go. They come out of the timeout. Junie hits a deep jumper. He's clearly feeling it at this point. So Ohio State's within 2. Get a stop, get a score. Who knows what happens? Ohio State would then go empty on 3 straight possessions. And on the very next possession, Nebraska immediately answered with a drive. Sanford drives, feeds it to Lawrence, who has a nice cut. It's back to 4 points. And the shot clock is winding on the next possession. The ball's in Brandon Knoll's hands, and he throws what I just wrote down, a bad pass. Easily stolen by Hoiberg, and he scores at the other end. Ohio State 2 possessions ago was within 2. Now it's down 6. Now, I felt like Ohio State was starting to dig in at this point, and this is where Thornton has the drive. Ohio State calls timeout, 12:24 to go. The Buckeyes force a miss. Thornton feeds Bynum for a lob. He scores. Ohio State's within 2. And then this was a possession that I felt like had Ohio State won, this was going to be the one I was really going to focus on, because the lack of ability to stop the bleeding, grab a loose ball, grab a 50-50 ball, whatever. So Amari Bynum commits a foul, takes us to the under 12 media timeout, 11:31 to go. Ohio State's within 2. So they come out of the timeout, and Jared Garcia hits the first free throw but misses the second. So Ohio State's down 3, but then it's a long rebound, and Frager grabs the rebound. So it extends the possession. As we're going out of bounds with 3.7 seconds left, and then Nebraska gets called for a shot clock violation. Ohio State really D'd up in that moment, forced the violation, come down the other end. Devin Royal scores. It's a 1-point game. And then Bruce Thornton gets fouled on a drive. He hits 2 free throws, 10:24 to go. Ohio State's up 1. First lead of the game for the Buckeyes, 10:24 to go. And then when Thornton hits a 3 with 8:38 to go, that made it 53-50 Ohio State. And then, all right, I got two more things that I starred, and then one other point I want to make, and then I'm going to wrap this up. So Ohio State's up 53-52. Amari Bynum ends up with a miss. I wrote no foul. I thought there was a lot of contact. I didn't call it. But then Nebraska comes down, and Frager gets a layup. So now it's a 1-point game. Bruce Thornton gets stripped. There's only turnover of the game. But then Ohio State still forces a miss, a 3-point miss, as the shot clock was winding down. The ball ends up in Christoph Tilley's hands, and he does a wide-open 3, and he misses it. And then Nebraska comes down at the other end, and Rink Mast buries the 3-pointer over Tilley. And I starred that because I just thought, that team center hits the big 3. This team center misses another 3. Just one team does one thing, one team does the other thing. This started really like the Nebraska run that helped flip the game back in their direction. So Mobley hits a 3 to put Ohio State back ahead 1. And then Thornton ends up with a foul on Sanford as he's cutting on a layup. I thought this was a moment where Bruce looked a little hobbled, and that made him a step slow. He hits the free throws. Ohio State's down 1. Thornton scores. Ohio State's up 1. And Devin Royal ends up fouling Rink Mast in the paint for a 3-point play. Shot clock winding. A lot of times I got shot clock winding down in my notes. So Ohio State's down 2. Mobley ends up missing a 3. Mast misses a 3. There's a lob to Christoph Tilley. It's a turnover. And then here was the backbreaker to me. So Mast misses a 3, but there's a long offensive rebound that gets tipped around. Nebraska gets the ball, gets it to Sanford. He hits the 3. Now Ohio State's down 5. And then they get the ball to Tilley, and he has the ball right in the paint, like right around the rim, and point blank misses. And then at the other end, it ends up being Tilley matched up in the paint with Frager. He fouls him on a leaner. That takes us to the under 4 immediate timeout, 2:18 to go. Hits the free throw. It's an 8-point deficit for Ohio State. It was going to be a tall order from that point on. Now, the last thing two last things I want to go over is from the 7:25 mark of the game. I had this in the takeaways as well. I can't find it right now, but Ohio State essentially played the final 7.5 minutes without making a substitution. Diebler had his starters on the floor, and given the lack of anything from anyone else, and with Brandon Knoll being unavailable, here it is. With 7:25 to go, Ohio State had its starters on the floor and did not make any more substitutions until there were 25 seconds left when Cups and Tilley were like offense-defense substitution there. Another sequence where like Diebler said he wished he'd used the timeout earlier and gotten those guys a little bit more of a breather perhaps, but didn't. And instead they had a timeout late. And so the last thing to talk about is the final shot that Ohio State got, which ends up being a Christoph Tilley 3-pointer. So Ohio State down 1 with about 13 seconds to go. The Buckeyes fouled Lawrence with 9.1 seconds. I had to stop the clock. They couldn't get a steal. So they stopped the clock with 9.1 seconds left, down 1, and he hits both free throws, which then obviously sets up, if you're Nebraska, you're not going to foul on a 3, and you don't want them to get off a 3. So Nebraska allows Ohio State to inbound the ball, and the action that Ohio State was going for was get the ball to Mobley, who is going to get it up the floor to Bynum, who's going to toss it back to Mobley for like a trailing. In my head, I was thinking like Villanova winning the national championship, like shovel pass back to him for a 3. They were running out of time at this point where going for 2 would have left them like still down 1 with about 3 seconds left. So the plan for Ohio State was to try to get it to Mobley for a 3. And I was actually surprised that he had as much room to work with as he did, that Mobley got the ball and ended up coming up the left side of the court and had room for a second to operate. Like I thought he would have been fouled sooner than that. But he wasn't, and that enabled him to get the ball up ahead to Tilley. Now, certainly it would have been nice for Ohio State had Tilley called the timeout maybe in that moment. He looked rushed in that second, and I think the quality of the shot reflected that. Diebler did point out that like had they called timeout there, they would have put themselves in a situation where Nebraska would have been unlikely to foul, because anything you would run in the half court on a sideline out of bounds play you could very easily make it look like you were in the act of shooting. Could have made it a little bit more of an interesting final look, but ultimately that's what Ohio State was trying to do. That's just kind of how it played out. And yeah, you would like to see somebody besides Christoph Tilley taking that last 3-point shot. So now it's off to Oregon. The Buckeyes will leave on Tuesday. I will leave on Wednesday, but very, very excited to bring you full coverage of this team in the Pacific Northwest and see where it goes from here. I mean, we've seen this team can win on the road, and these are 2 very winnable road games in the Big Ten. So we'll bring you as much coverage as we can from out that way. So I'm going to end it here. As always, you can send along your questions, your comments, your love notes, your hate mail, and otherwise constructive criticism to me at Adam Jardy on Twitter or ajardy@dispatch.com. Thanks again for listening. Thanks to Patrick Flaherty for dealing with a podcast that I'm realizing is verging on 50 minutes. Holy moly. All right, I got to shut up and get out of here. I'll be back with you. It'll be East Coast time. It'll be crazy late. I guess crazy early Friday morning. So look for that podcast on Friday. It'll be a good one. Until then, be kind, take care, and we'll talk soon.
Be sure and subscribe to the Buckeye Extra podcast in the iTunes Store, the Google Play Store, or on Stitcher.